Everybody's here. Welcome. My apologies for having to cancel last week's class. My Pathsara teacher from my childhood days had sadly passed away, and I needed to attend his Prarthana Sabha. So that's why I had to cancel that class. And I know there is a conflict as well today. There is another, I'm sure, very interesting lecture going on today at Oshwal Center from Bhai Shri of Srimad Rajchandra Mission Saila, I think. And some of you may be participating there. I thought we'd carry on with today's lesson, and those who could not come today can catch up on the YouTube later on. Let me just first share my slides and we'll start with the prayer. Okay. We start with the prayer. Namo Aryantanam, Namo Sattanam, Namo Ayariyanam, Namo Uvotsayanam, Namo Loye Sabba Sahunam, Eso Panchanamukkaro Sabba Pavapanasano, Mangalanancha Sabbe Simpadamam Havai Mangalam. Veera Sarvasura Surendra Mahito Veerambuddha Sansrita Virena Abhiyata Swakarmanichayo Viraya Nityam Namah Vira Tirthamidam Prauthamatulam Virasya Ghoram Tapo Vire Sri Dhruti Kirtikanti Nichaya Sri Virabhadram Visa Anguthe Amrutavase Labdi Tana Bandar Sri Guru Gautama Samariye Manavanchita Fadadatar. So just to remind everybody, the format of these sessions is that we are going to listen to the content which describes the event and the thinking behind it and the outcome of that story. We will listen, reflect, and debate any questions. We internalize it and we try and incorporate it into life. The current topic that we are doing, as you all know, is Bhare Sajjai Stuti. And I'll recite the Sajjai again to remind myself and everybody about the Sajjai. And just to remind people of what that Sajjai is about. There are a few slides after I've recited the Sajjai so that everybody knows. Okay. Bharhe Sar Bahubali Abhay Kumaro Dandan Kumaro Sirio Aniauto Aimuto Nagadatto Mej Thuli Baddo Vairisi Nandi Sen Sinhagiri Kaivanno Asukosala Pundurio Kesi Karakandu Halla Vihala Sudansana Sal Maha Sal Sali Baddo Dasana Baddo Pasana Chando Jasa Baddo Jambu Pahu Vankachulo Gai Sukumalo Avanti Sukumalo Danno Ilai Putto Chilai Putto Abahu Muni Ajjagiri Ajjarakhya Ajja Suhathi Udayago Manago Kalayasuri Sambho Pajjuno Muladevo Pabavo Vinuhu Kumaro Ad Kumaro Dad Pahariya Sijansa Kurugaddu Sijan Bhava Mehe Kumaro Emai Mahasatta Dintu Suham Gunganehim Sanjuta Jaisim Nam Gahane Pav Banda Vilayam Janti Sulasa Chandanabala Manorama Mayanreha Damayanti Namaya Sundari Siya Nanda Baddha Subadaya Raimai ऋषिदत्ता पौमावई अंजना सिरिदेवी जिट्ठ सुजिट्ठ मिगावई पभावई चिलना देवी बंबी सुंदरी रूपिणी रेवई कुंती शिवा जयंतीय दिवई दुवई दाहधारणी कलावई पुफ्फचुलाय पौमावई गौरी गंधारी लखमणा सुसीमाय जम्बुवई सच्चभामा रूपिणी कलहट्ठ महिष्यो जखाय जखदिना भुआ तह चेव भुवदिन्नाय सेना वेणा रेणा भैणियो थुली भद्दस इच्छाई महासयो जयंती अकलंक सील कलियाओ अज्जवी वज्जई जासिम जस पढ़ो तिहोणे सयले. Normally, the tradition during Pratikraman is you start a sajjai with Naukar mantra and end the sajjai recitation by with a Naukar mantra as well. So, just to follow that tradition and get the benefit of reciting the Naukar mantra, I'll recite that again. नमो अरिहंताणं नमो सिद्धाणं नमो आयर्याणं नमो वज्जायाणं नमो लोये सव्वसाहुणं येषो पञ्चनमुक्कारो सप्पपावपणासनो मङ्गलानं च सव्वेसिं परमं हवै मङ्गलम्. Again, just to remind people, a sajja is a contemplation on the self, meaning Atma, and Swadhyay is sajjai. What we are doing today is also Swadhyay. We are remembering in this Sajjai 100 individuals who contemplated on the soul and made great spiritual progress by changing the course of their lives. By speaking out their names and reflecting on their lives and deeds, we are appreciating their actions and hope and pray that we can walk the path they followed. That is our Swadhyay or Sajjai. Again, as I've mentioned many times, this Sajjai, this particular Sajjai is recited during the morning Pratikraman, but during the evening Pratikraman as well, there is always a Sajjai. The 100 names in the Sajjai include 53 great men, Mahapurusho, and 47 great women, Mahasatiyo. So far, we've heard the stories of 4 great individuals, Sri Bharat Chakravarti, Sri Bahubali, Sri Abhay Kumar, Sri Dandan Kumar, and today we are going to talk again about Sri Dandan Kumar and Sri Shriyak. I've included Dandan Kumar again because I think some aspects of his story need a bit more exploration. And then we will spend most of our time today on just one more character, Shriyak. I was thinking of doing 2 characters today, but I thought there is a lot to digest with the story of Sri Shriyak, and there is a lot of historical perspective there, and we'll be coming to other aspects of his life in later part of um this whole Sajjai Swadhyay. Because we will be talking about a character that I'll mention today in relation to Shriyak a bit later. He is number 10 in the list, and we'll be talking about his life in a couple of weeks' time, or maybe about 3-4 weeks' time. So let's start with just some reflection on Dandan Kumar. I hope you all remember the story and who Dandan Kumar was. Just some basic points to remind everybody. Dandan Kumar was the son of Lord Krishna. He had become detached from worldly life and become a Muni in Bhagwan Nimnath's order, who was the Tirthankar Paramatma at the time of Lord Krishna, at the time of Mahabharata. He had made a vow only to eat food obtained by his own merits. So what that meant was he had discovered early on in his life, in his monkhood, that it was a bad karma had come to fruition, a bad karma from his previous lives had come to fruition, and that made it very difficult for people to feel the how to actually give him food. So there other monks could go around and people would feel enthusiastic and give them a lot of food, a lot of good food. But for because of his very severe previous the karmas that he acquired in his previous lives, and I think there is a story attached to how he had acquired those karmas, which I'll need to search for and maybe give you some details at a future class. But Dandan Kumar's, Muni Dandan Kumar's karma that made it very difficult for him to for people to feel generous towards him and give him gochri whenever he went out to obtain food. So as you all know, Jain monks go out to various different houses and ask for uh, alms for food from different houses and then take it with them to the upashray, and they all the munis of that particular order would get together and share the food and eat it. Just some aspects of gauchari. It is called gauchari. When a Jain Muni goes out to seek alms or seek food from different households, that process is called gauchari. Gauchari voravanu. I don't know if anybody knows what is the difference between gauchari and gaddachari. Anybody? You can put your answer down on as a message. No? Gau is a guy or cow, and gauchari is describing how a cow feeds. So if you have seen a cow in a field full of grass eating, the cow bites off the grass from the top. So the grass then has a chance to grow back up again, and it does not destroy the roots of the grass, and the field remains intact. That is how cows feed. As opposed to that, donkeys feed very differently. They feed by a process in which they will grab the piece of grass and pull it out from the roots. So the whole sort of blades of grass along with the roots attached to them will come out and they will eat like that. So what happens after a donkey has been around on a field is that there are patches of bare area where the grass has been removed with its roots. Now, why is a Jain monk's process of seeking alms described it this, because they have got some very strict rules that whenever they go to anybody's house, they will only take food that is spare. So if a householder says to a monk, I prepared this specially for you because I knew you were coming, and if there has been effort made to do that, then that food is not suitable for the monk or the nun. If we have made dal bhat shak rotli in our household and there is some spare rotli, a monk would watch how many people there are and what sort of household it is, and they then take a bit of what we had made that would actually be spare, and they would go to various different houses to take a bit from different houses and then collect the food that way. Occasionally, when somebody is being very, very generous and being very with a very, very elevated thoughts, and their whole emotions and demeanor suggests that they are on a very higher level spiritually with worship for a monk, then sometimes they will allow that person to carry on giving as much as they want. And there is a recent story on Jain media. Those of you who watch some of those videos might have seen this video. There is a monk and a few monks who, and this is of recent time, just a few weeks, maybe a couple of months old story. They go to a particular village in South India, somewhere in Andhra, Karnataka, somewhere there. And this particular place has got very few Jains. So they're going to a street with lots of shops, and a shopkeeper sees the monks and feels very humbled by what they're doing, and he goes out and tells the head monk that here you are going around places and you would probably need some money. Here I'm giving you 500 rupees, please take it. And then the people who are accompanying the monk explains to him in his language, because in that particular place, very few people spoke Hindi. Some people spoke a bit of English, but very few people would understand Hindi or Gujarati. The language in that street is, I think, Telugu or Kannada. I've forgotten the exact details, but it is a place in South India. So somebody explains to him that monks don't even touch money and that this would be of no use. And he says, let me serve them. What can I do? So they will take food. Says, I just leave behind the shop, come through and come to my house. And the monk goes along with his other disciples to the house. And there you can see in the video how it's depicted that the lady of the house, they all come round and start serving them with food. But because they are non-Jains and they feel that this food may not be suitable, they have been they're being educated in as this process is going on. Then the lady of the house comes down and says, will you actually take some rice? So it's a plain rice that is just been made ready. And the Muni says, yes, please, that will be fine. So she brings a whole bowl of rice. Then seeing them, she asks, will you have some more? And he says, yes, again. And there are several people in the house, but in the end, this lady ends up giving him 4 large bowls of rice. And the Muni doesn't actually refuse, because this lady and the whole family, you can see that in the video, are being so generous and being so worshipful to the monks that the Muni doesn't say no. So Dandan Kumar is going around this city that they are in, and wherever they go from one place to other, he has been trying to obtain food uh, for about 6 months, and nobody is actually giving him any. They have no problems giving other monks food, but for Anika Putra, for Dandan Kumar, sorry, nobody seems to feel that they want to give him anything. So the level of generosity that people feel towards us is also something that is controlled by our karmas to an extent. So how popular we are, how much people like us, some of us may feel that there are that we are very popular and that we get respect wherever we go. There are some, and all of us have probably experienced this at some time in our life, that people just want to try and uh, be disrespectful to us or be uh, insulting to us. And there are some people who go through life feeling like that. Some of the things that young children sometimes experience in schools, where the whole class has found a victim and everybody engages in bullying that particular child. So a lot of these things are generated by karmas acquired in previous lives. So Dandan Kumar just cannot find anybody to give him food, but once while he is on his uh, rounds to get some food, Lord Krishna uh, is riding by. He gets down from his chariot and bows down to the Muni, because Lord Krishna had great respect for all Munis. He knows that he is his son, but he is a Muni now, and he bows down to him. Somebody from a neighboring household on the street sees this, and he thinks that if Lord Krishna has gone uh, down and bowed down to this Muni, then he must be very important and he must deserve some food. So he goes into the household and gives him some food. Taran Kumar is not sure that this is because that person felt generous towards him, because he felt that this was a monk who was Nirgranth and he was following the five great vows. So he didn't think that, he wasn't sure that this person actually had uh, that respect, and that is why he had given him food. So he goes to Bhagwan Nemnath, who is obviously uh, fully omniscient with Keval Gnan, and asks him, the food that I've obtained today, Lord, is that food something that I has been given to me because of my own merit? Has my bad karma that has been plaguing me for so many months now, is that now finally over? And Bhagwan Nemnath says, no, Danan Kumar, that food was given to you because that person saw Lord Krishna bowing down to you, and it is because Krishna was considered to be very important, obviously, because he's the emperor there. And that's why this person was just following Krishna and giving you food. It wasn't because he thought that he wanted to give it to you. So Dhanan Kumar then, without batting an eyelid, without worrying about it, even though he's been hungry for such a long time, he says, well, my vow is not to eat food that I have not obtained without my merit. So this food was obviously not given to me because of my merit. Therefore, I must get rid of this food. So he goes to a place in a potter's yard. you probably know that a potter's yard is full of clay that the potter uses to make pots. And he is gone there because he can then put the food, throw the food away. So this is basically kind of ladu modak, it's called, and he wants to get rid of it so that it is disposed of safely, so other small insects and other life doesn't grow there and doesn't get killed. So that would be the process of discarding food that they cannot give, that they cannot eat for all munis. So he goes there, and on a pile of clay, he takes this modak with his hands and crushes it so that it falls down into small pieces like powder. And as he's doing this process, spiritually, he is climbing up very, very fast. And he is in such an equanimous state that he gets rid of all his karmas and achieves Keval Gnan there and then within a very short time. That is why we remember Dandan Kumar in this Sajjai, in the Paresar Sajjai every morning. Now, I said that we'll spend more time with Shriyak today. And I just wanted to give the background of who Shriyak was. There are a few very interesting stories about this time in our history. Um, how many of you have watched the series called Chanakya? It was the original is in Hindi. It was broadcast by BBC a few years ago with English subtitles, and you can buy DVDs of it. And I think a lot of the episodes are on YouTube. Anybody who's watched? I'm sure you've all heard of Chanakya. No? Shriyak was a contemporary of Chanakya and a friend of Chanakya. Who was Shriyak and why is he remembered? The reason why he's remembered will come to at the end, but the previous life of Shriyak, in some ways, it's very tragic, that whole history around that time of the Nand dynasty. Nand was a king in the current state of Bihar, in that area, probably about more than 2000 years ago. There's a few hundred years after Bhagwan Mahavir's Nirvan. It was also the time of Bhadrabahu Swami. And the last person to be taught the 14 Purvas, Stulbhadra or Stulibhadra, was the elder brother of Shriyak. And we'll come to Stulibhadra's story that I reminded you at the beginning. He is, I think, number 10 in this Sajjai. And there are lots of interesting stories around his life as well. Shriyak was the second son of the prime minister of that land, whose name was Shaktal or Shakdal Mantri. The post of the chief minister or prime minister in this king's court had been held by their family for some time. His father was a very, very able prime minister and had done great work trying to keep the stability of this particular kingdom, which for many different reasons I mean, it's a very interesting time, and the story around this is very interesting. There is a lot of politics going on, and the stability of this kingdom and the happiness of the people was at stake if the regime was not stabilized. And Shakdal Mantri had been trying very hard for a long time to ensure that the bad elements which were trying to wrest power from Nand and destabilize the kingdom were not successful. And they had been trying in many different ways to ensure that the prominence of Sakdal Mantri and him being the king actually listening to him and keeping him in that chief minister's post was detrimental to the interests of these other politicians who wanted to get the whole kingdom unsettled and divided, and maybe they were working with other kings who were waiting on the wings to try and see if this kingdom became weak, then they could come and annex it. So Sakdal Mantri had been trying for a long time to ensure that the king was fully trusting of him, Sakdal Mantri. But it seemed as if that was going to be a losing battle, and there were signs, and there came a time when it was quite evident that the king was actually listening to that other group which was trying very hard to destabilize the kingdom, and was leaning towards them. And Shaktal Mantri felt that if the king lost trust in me, then the whole kingdom is at risk, and that those bad elements are going to destroy this kingdom and the stability and the happiness of the people. And he couldn't find any way out of this situation. And he says, the only way that I can get my king to have faith in me is to sacrifice myself. And he thinks very hard. I mean, Saktal Mantri and the whole family was, they were all staunch Jains. They had uh, great ability, they had great knowledge. Uh, Saktal Mantri had Stilbhadra as his eldest son, Shriyak as his second son, and he had 7 daughters. All those 7 daughters are remembered in this Sajai as well, and we'll come to their story a bit later on. I've said here the details I'll post on a slide next week, but today I'm hoping that you are feeling that you are able to listen to this story without any other slides. So Shaktal Mantri is discussing this situation, and he is very worried. One day he sits down with his son Shriyak, because Tulibhadra is not in the picture at the moment. And we'll come to why Tulibhadra is not in the picture soon enough. And I think I'll mention this today, but we will expand on that story when we talk about Tulibhadra in a few weeks' time. So he sits down, Sakdal Mantri sits down with Shriyak and says, look, we have to do something to try and restore the king's faith in our family and in this position of the chief minister, because if you don't retain that, then the kingdom and the happiness of the people is at severe risk. Now, giving this story without the wider context, when, as I said, this is a very sort of interesting part of the times, and some of this is actually highlighted in the series Chanakya. If any of you get some time, I think it's about 40-50 parts, so you need to find uh, maybe 2-3 months to uh, watch these videos and understand them. But Shakdal Mantri finds a solution. He says the only way you can actually help me restore the king's faith in our family is in the Raj Sabha, in the assembly tomorrow, in the king's assembly. What I want you to do is, in the presence of the king, in the presence of the courtiers and the whole assembly, I want you to cut off my head. Now, when we listen to these stories or see them written down, there are short sentences referenced like this, but the whole process of how you come to this and understanding this and making this vow with his son that you will do this tomorrow because this is the only way to save the kingdom, and I've tried everything else, but you will do it unflinchingly. And Shriyak agrees to do that. Now, Shriyak is not an ordinary person. In terms of the family culture and the upbringing, all the children have been brought up with some very fantastic values. They are all brilliant. And Shriyak very, very reluctantly, with tears in his eyes, agrees. And the next day in the assembly, once it starts, Shriyak says, Shriyak is in a position as well in the king's retinue of advisors and generals. And he says that Mara Rajano jane દ્રોહ કર્યો છે તેનું મસ્તક આ ખડગ છેદશે. That anybody who has been unfaithful to the kingdom and to my king, I will cut off their heads with this sword. And he does that in the presence of the king and the whole assembly. And everybody is absolutely shocked by this act. And Shriyak then stands there and tells the assembly and the king that you did not have faith in the way my father was running the kingdom, and also you did not have faith in the ability to maintain the stability and the peace and to prevent other kings from invading our country and making it unstable or making it uh, annexed by enemies of the state. And over a period of time, it's been obvious that your faith in Shaktal Mantri was being eroded and you were at risk. So he and the king, as a result of this particularly severe action, absolutely now understands and believes that Shaktal Mantri was absolutely faithful and he has given his life to make sure that I do not have any doubt. And he says, the seat of the chief minister has been in your family. I want you to take up that seat. He tells Shriyak. Shriyak says that I've got an elder brother who deserves this seat and this position as the prime minister, and we must call him because I am not in that position. So people to go and inform Sthulbhadra. Now, let me come to the story of where Sthulbhadra is and what he was doing. Now, Sthulbhadra is no ordinary person, but his story is sung, and it is said that Sthulbhadra will be remembered by people for 84 choices, whereas most Tirthankar Paramatmas get remembered for 3 choices. So in the current time, we know who the 24 Tirthankars in our particular Chovisi were, Bhagwan Rishabdev, Ajitnath, Sambhavnath. We know all of them. We also know who were the Tirthankars in the previous Chovisi before this, and we also know who the Tirthankars will be in the next Chovisi. That is generally how far, generally, it would be common knowledge that Tirthankars would be known and remembered for 3 Chovises. And it is said that Sthulbhadra and his story will be remembered for 84 choices. And what did he do? We'll come to that when we recite his story. But he is currently at this moment in the story has been living with a dancer called Kosha, who was extremely beautiful. She was the most beautiful lady in that time and in that particular area. And he had been in love with her from his very young age, and he gives up everything to go and live with her. So Kosha earned her living by dancing. She's described in different ways. So she's described as a nartaki, meaning a dancer. She's also described as a Vesha, meaning somebody who lives by uh, selling favors of sexual nature. But in those times, dancers who were extremely talented were protected by the kingdom, and Kosha was one such person. And Sthulbhadra and she were in love for many, many years. And Sthulbhadra had left his house, had given up everything that he had more or less lost touch with his family, and gone to live with Kosha. On this day, a messenger goes to Kosha's house and demands to see Sthulbhadra, and Sthulbhadra comes down and asks why he has come, and he tells him that I've come from your family home and I've been asked by your brother and the king to bring you to the court to take up the post of the chief minister because your father is dead. And Sthulbhadra learns of the circumstances around this death and what has happened. And Sthulbhadra, being the person he was, suddenly, with these events as they are unfolding, completely becomes detached from worldly life, and he decides that he doesn't want to be a minister. He doesn't want to stay in Sansar as a householder anymore. He walks out of Kosa's house and says, I am going to become a monk. And he tells the messenger that I do not want to be a chief minister. So let my brother take hold of that post. And make a success of it. And still Badra then goes and becomes a monk. And the story of exactly what happens after that to Still Badra will recite later on during this um, series. Now back to Shriyak. Shriyak by default has to become the prime minister of this land. But Shriyak, with his upbringing and with his knowledge and with the culture and the religion that they've been brought up, Shriyak used to do puja 3 times a day. He used to do pratikraman every day. He was an ideal Shravak. He spent a lot of his wealth in helping people in all the 7 kshetras. And during his lifetime, Shriyak uh, created 100 new temples all around the country or around their own land. And he also built about 700 dharmashalas for people to come and stay while they were traveling. And he sort of lived his life, even though he was the chief minister of this land, in absolutely an ideal Shravak's way of life. And as he got older, he decided to become a monk. And the main reason why Shriyak is remembered was because of his uh, life, which was so religious. And this part of the story is recited here that during Paryushan, his sisters are persuading him to do an upvas. Shriyak had always found it very difficult. So a lot of us who find doing an upvas extremely difficult can remember what Shriyak did. His sisters were trying to get him to understand and detach himself from this, and they gently persuaded him to do an upvas on that day. Shriyak was extremely hungry that night, and because the time of his death was near, on that end, on that particular day when he done an upvas, he found it very difficult to remain hungry, but he does not break his vow. He remains steadfast and concentrates on his own nature, and his mind and his emotions are at a very peaceful level, and he is in riding high on a subdhyan, and his life ended soon that time, and he's gone to Swarglok, become a Dev. That is how the event is described. And it is also said at the end of the story that within a short time, within a few lifetimes, uh, it doesn't say exactly how much, how many. It says Alp Samaima, meaning in a short time, he will achieve nirvana and go to moksha in his subsequent lives as a human being. And that is why in this sajjai we bow down to Shriyak, remembering his life. But those of you who are interested, that particular period in Indian history is something that is worth studying, because as a means of understanding a bit more about those times, but also about some great men who are remembered uh, in a lot of our Jain stories. So we'll get into more detail of the associations that we have established with this story of Stulibhadra, and there are other stories linked to that. And these have been, a lot of you may have heard the story of Stulibhadra and Koshanartaki. Uh, those of you who have not, we will come to that. So I will end today's class. And before I say Kshamapna, I'll open for any questions, if anybody has got any questions.
I have a couple of questions,
Yeah,
and I think they are almost similar, both of them.
yeah.
Uh, uh, Bhavik and Shandip have both asked, by disposing of the food, is he not wasting it, and therefore, how does he stroke she achieve shed karma? And also, why would they get rid of the food? Would it not be beneficial to give it to somebody else rather than just disposing it?
I mean, there are many reasons why he would have chosen that. I mean, in terms of balance, in any particular action, the benefits and the risk or the loss is something that one needs to consider more prominently. So in terms of wasting food, monks don't normally. Your question that could he not have given it to somebody else? So in those times, these monks were probably uh, Ekal Vihari, they would be roaming on their own. That may not have been suitable. The time may not have been suitable for others. And you cannot just dispose of that food anywhere. So you have to go somewhere where there was no chance of that food attracting insects that could then be at risk of their lives because of the place that they are in. So getting rid of it on balance was probably the best thing to do. And a monk would have taken this decision having considered all different aspects of that particular action, he could not eat it because that was not something that he'd obtained out from his own merits. So that food was unsuitable for him. Monks, once they have acquired that food, they can't just give it to anybody else because it is then considered to be Guru Dravya. Other monks may be able to use it, but that may not have been possible because of the structure of the group of monks at the time. The details of this I couldn't find in this particular reference, but if I come across any greater expansion on this particular story, then I'll definitely come back to it. But thank you for that question. But getting rid of the food is a lesser of a problem than breaking your vow. And the way he did it, the greatest benefit is that he is in such an equanimous state that spiritually he is on a high. He is getting rid of karmas extremely fast, and within a short time, he achieves Kevul Gnan. Okay? And I think some of the difficulties are that the way a lot of these stories are described, we need to have a bit more understanding and context of the wider principles, but also a lot of these references are not written down as novels. A lot of these stories of some great people are mentioned with the most important events, which then one needs to reflect on and dig deeper into it. So you're right, you're asking the right questions, but in terms of the detail, certain things are not obvious with this particular reference, but with something else, if I find it, I'll definitely bring it back. Okay.
That's all the questions I had. Mira, did you have any questions?
I have a few. Darshana is saying that by saying I'll cut your heads, would this not build more karma?
It would.
And how did he get rid of this karma based on this?
You see, again, the same question comes: what is the greater good? Now, these are no ordinary people. Shaktal Mantri, Shriyak, Stulibhadra, the whole family is, when we talk about the story of Stulibhadra and his sisters, that particular reference that comes along, these are extremely brilliant. These are people who, if we look at it in today's term, they would have an IQ which would surpass anybody living today. And we will understand that when we listen to Stilbhadra's story. The greater good was the stability of the kingdom and the safety of the whole population of that land. The greater good was restoring the king's faith in what Saktal Mantri had been trying to do to establish and to ensure that the kingdom was safe, in the full knowledge of what other elements were trying to do. So these were not ordinary times. These were times when, and to risk his own life and tell his own son to actually not just risk, but to ensure that his son actually cut off his head, it did require a huge amount of thought, but also determination, courage, and an evaluation of the position of what was going on. So, I mean, if you go through the history of those times, you would find it very difficult to understand the complexity of what was happening in those in that kingdom at that time. If you watch Chanakya, it will give you some inkling of the kinds of things in terms of politics that were going on. But this was the best solution for that time as seen by Shaktal Mantri and agreed by Shriyak. So yes, on the face of it, it may appear to be a cruel and a thoughtless act, but in fact it was extremely well thought through, and that, as far as I know, established a stability in that kingdom, which ultimately Chanakya, uh, with his machinations and in his brilliance, slowly converts it into Bharatvarsh, and he expands the kingdom under Chandragupta Maurya, and he ensures that that whole area, Bharatvarsh, was stable for a long time to come. So the Maurya dynasty, Chandragupta Maurya, and the establishment of that kingdom, and all the brilliance of Chanakya and how he manipulated the whole thing, that all followed the Nanda dynasty. And what was happening in the Nanda dynasty was very detrimental to the health and the wealth and stability of the people. So that is why this particular act was undertaken. Hope that helps. But I think if anyone of you are interested, it's worth trying to find some books, and I'll see if I can find some of that particular period. I'm sure there is a huge amount of material on the internet. Okay,
Well, thank you. Thanks, Ajit Bhai.
Yeah.
Nick has just messaged he'd like to share something.
Yeah.
So there's a great achievement has been made by a Jain Acharya for doing a vihar to Lahore in Pakistan to take darshan of Pujya Acharya Atma Ramji's Baruka. So this event's the first time it's happened for over 75 years.
So he's traveled to Lahore to put the Charan Paduka of Atma Ramji Maharaj. Okay.
Yes.
Great. Yes. Thank you for sharing, Nick.
Okay.
Wasn't aware. Yeah.
I don't have any other questions on my end.
Okay. Great. Anybody else for a final question? I hope this story was interesting. But there's a lot around that story. But just try and remember that these great people are remembered for their greatness in spiritual life. Not so Bharat Chakravarti is not being remembered in this Sajjai because he was a Chakravarti. Bahubali is not being remembered in this Sajjai because he was the son of Bhagwan Rushabdev, and he himself was extremely strong, and Bahubali had a huge amount of other great qualities. He is remembered because of how he gave up his kingdom and achieved Keval Gnan and got rid of his pride. Abhay Kumar is not remembered because he was a brilliant chief minister of King Shrenik. He is remembered because of how he used his brilliance to actually not just improve the kingdom, but also to emancipate his own life. Dhanran Kumar is not remembered because he was the son of Lord Krishna. He is remembered because of the vow. And Shriyak is not remembered for this particular act that would be prominent in people's mind or in any story, but because of the fact that how he lived his life as a Shravak and how he then became a monk and what he did in being staunch in his vow of doing an upvas. That is why Shriyak is remembered. But all the story around it is also relevant because all these people were great people, and it also tells us what the background is of spiritual greatness. So background of how these people, they were no ordinary people, but all their background and the way they lived the rest of their lives was exemplary. So with Bharat Chakravarti, we heard something about what he did throughout his life to remind himself of who he was. So try and hold on to those messages. I know the rest of these stories are extremely interesting, but try and think through a lot of these other aspects. Okay, thank you. I ask for forgiveness if I've said anything that is against the teachings of great Jainas, of Tirthankar Paramatmas, and against the principles of Jain Dharma. Manuchan Kayati Michami Dukudam. Sarvamangalamangalyam Sarakalyana Karanam Pradhanam Sarvadharmanam Jainam Jaiti Sasanam. Thank you all. We'll see you all next week.